Female rulers are scarce in history, and they often rose to power with a large amount of dissent from their people. Now, we all know of Cleopatra. She's been in movies, and she's become a household name at this point for being a female pharaoh. However, few of us have heard of the first official female pharaoh named Hatshepsut. Now, I first learned of Hatshepsut when I was in a middle school history course, and of all the history courses I've taken to this day, I don't even think she's been mentioned. So why has she piqued my interest all the way up until now after years? Well, we're going to get into Hatshepsut's rise to power and her pharaoh status, her 20-year reign, and her legacy that was covered up until the 1800s. How did this happen? How did she become the pharaoh? Well, it kind of goes without saying that the royal family in Egypt was very complicated. There was intermarrying between family members to, keep the bloodline. Many royals have that in their history. So she was born in 1473 BC to King Thutmose I as his oldest child, and she had no brothers, no legitimate brothers. Now, King Thutmose I did end up having a son with one of his secondary wives, making Thutmose II. Now, Thutmose II was Hatshepsut's half-brother, who she would eventually marry. But first, at 10 years old, she became a respected religious leader called the God's Wife of Amun. This is described by Joshua Mark of Ancient History Encyclopedia as the highest honor a woman could attain in Egypt after the position of queen, and actually bestowing far more power than most queens ever knew. Then at the age of 12, she married her half-brother, Thutmose II. And they also were having trouble conceiving a male heir between the two of them. So Thutmose II ended up having a son with one of his secondary wives, just like his father, named Thutmose III. Now, soon after Thutmose III, who would be Hatshepsut's stepson, soon after Thutmose III was born, his father, the pharaoh, Thutmose II, passed away very recently after, meaning that the line would go straight to Thutmose III. But he was very young, and he was a child, baby, so Hatshepsut was named the queen regent and would rule in his stead until he came of age. This is pretty common in a lot of history, or in a lot of historical royal families. Now, at this point, she was the queen regent ruling. However, she followed tradition up until Thutmose III came of age and was supposed to be the ruler, or the pharaoh. Now, once he came of age, she obviously did not give up her power, and she stayed in power. And at this point forward, in all depictions of her, she was portrayed as a man with a beard, actually, because all pharaohs had the beard, and she was even wearing, traditional male clothing in artworks of her and in statues of her. So her most well-known building project was called Deir el-Bahir. Now, this is right near the Valley of the Kings, where many pharaohs' tombs have been found, and it is huge, and wasn't attributed to her until obviously the early 1800s. So the history of this temple, Deir el-Bahir, was not really known. Now, her most proud accomplishment was a trade expedition to modern-day Somalia, where she brought back ivory, gold, and incense, and basically made the people of Egypt very rich. Now, this scene is actually depicted outside her temple, Deir el-Bahir, and it shows her coming back from her expedition, and there's just a bunch of statues depicting it right outside her temple. Now, she died in her mid-40s, but what of her legacy? Well, after her death, she was buried alongside her father, King Thutmose I, in the Valley of the Kings. She was among the first to be buried in the Valley of the Kings, second to, of course, King Thutmose I, her father. Thutmose III was now promoted to being the pharaoh after being a general in the army, or in the Egyptian army, for a few years. Now, a few years into his reign, he tried to erase all traces of his mother, and it is unknown exactly why he attempted to do this. However, historians at Britannica, the Encyclopedia Britannica, suspect that it was because he wanted to create a straight shot from Thutmose I to himself in the Egyptian pharaoh line, so that Hatshepsut was not included at all, since she was a female that could be easily discredited, and he wanted to clean up the familial line. Now, many of us have never even heard of Hatshepsut, and I hope this helped you learn a little bit more about Egyptian history. Hatshepsut fought for her own power and crafted many mementos so that she could be remembered, and she worked for her whole life for Egypt, just to be erased by her son Thutmose III. So if you're listening to this right now and you watch this video, you are proving his attempts to be futile, and we're learning about Hatshepsut no matter what. Thank you very much, everyone.